I'm Andrea, a passionate DEI advocate and consultant on a mission. Join me in each episode as we celebrate diversity, ignite conversations, and craft workplaces and educational institutions where everyone thrives. This podcast is my commitment to making a meaningful impact on the world of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So are you ready? Let's get Diversifused. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Get Diversifuse podcast. I'm your host, Andrea Horton-Mericli, founder of Diversifuse Consulting and a passionate DEI advocate and ally. In today's episode, we will discuss the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion in media and business with our guest speaker, Tyrone Ty Miller. Ty is a media professional who has enjoyed a long career in radio and TV. After graduating from Emerson College in Boston, Massachusetts, he began his professional career in the city and worked in Baltimore before moving to Pittsburgh in 1986. While working at WAMO FM, W-A-M-O FM, he served as a morning drive host before making a career change to sports broadcasting in 1990 with a nationally based Sheridan Broadcasting Network. Ty worked as a sports anchor and sports director before he was eventually promoted to the network's director of news and sports. In 2009, he created and began producing a TV sports show called Championship Chase. The show covers the Pittsburgh Steelers and is the only Pittsburgh sports television broadcast with Black producers, writers, hosts, and analysts covering the city's NFL team. This fall will mark its 15th season on the air. Congratulations. In addition to Championship Chase, Ty also produces Black history programming that airs in February and June of each year. Ty also began the Power News Radio Network, providing urban radio stations nationwide with news and sports programming conducive to their format. His list of clients includes stations in Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and Iowa. So welcome, Ty, to the Get Diversifuse podcast. Thank you so much for being our guest today.
It's good to be here, Andrea. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine.
Awesome. Well, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself, your experience, things that are not in the wonderful bio that I read, but how you came to found Championship Chase and the Power News Radio Network.
Well, first of all, in terms of my bio, you included everything. The only thing that was missing is that I knew when I was about 10 or 11 years old what I wanted to do. I just had no idea how to go about doing it. I knew I wanted to get in some type of media broadcasting, especially radio, because I always listened to the radio a lot when I was a kid. And I grew up in Bessemer, Alabama, which is about 10 miles north of Birmingham. And when I was a kid, I used to hear the Sheridan Broadcasting Network on radio down there, just had no idea where it was coming from. But I knew it was not local radio, but they played news broadcasts and sports broadcasts. And I just had no idea I would end up. It's kind of funny how I came full circle, that I started out listening to that broadcast down there of a network, and then I ended up working for that network for over 30 years. After graduating high school in Alabama, I moved to Boston, Massachusetts, and I primarily moved there just to work, and I was going to go to the University of Alabama, but I waited too late to get enrolled, could not get a dorm, so I just decided to go work in Boston where my sister lived, and I ended up working at a Baskin Robbins up there in Boston, ice cream place. And I often talked to a lot of customers, and it was just a joy just making friends that way. And during my work hours, I listened to the radio a lot again. So while I was there, I might as well go to school up here. So I ended up looking for communications college, and I found Emerson College. And from there, after graduation, worked there, moved to Baltimore, then to Pittsburgh. You're muted right now for some reason.
Oh my goodness. So what about now?
Yeah, not now.
Okay, interesting. My mic went on mute. Yeah, before the show started, Ty's mic was on mute, but now mine is. But now it's off. You can hear me now, right?
Right.
Okay, cool. So yeah, my best friend almost didn't go to college also because she didn't have a dorm. Luckily, we were both going to the same university and that my sister went to, and my sister had already, she was done with the dorms and moved out into an apartment, and she had a spare room. Whew, that's how my best friend was able to go to college. But yeah, you have a very interesting story,
Mhm.
and just your career progression and all. So what inspired you to focus on creating Black-led sports programming, and what challenges did you face in bringing this vision to life?
Well, when you think about Black-led programming, traditionally there has not been a lot of it across the nation, either on radio or TV. There have been,
Mhm.
you can count in some cases less than 10 or 15 outlets at one time in terms of radio from a national standpoint. There've always been radio stations nationwide that,
Mhm.
create Black programming, mainly
Yeah,
music programming. But when it comes to news and sports, there are very few. So after
yeah.
working for the Sheridan Broadcasting Network all those years, and when they ceased operations in 2017, there were still local radio stations nationwide who wanted the Black programming that we provided for them, being that it was news or sports. And we say Black programming only because there were news and sports stories often that the mainstream media often did not cover. And
Oh.
those were stories of interest to the Black or African American community that we took special interest in. And we took special pains to cover those stories with either the sound and the overall stories, or plus progressing the story as to what had happened. Most
Mhm.
of the time, people rely on the Associated Press or
Yeah.
Reuters or the Voice of America type broadcast to give you a national scope of what's going on. But oftentimes, they don't give you the African American viewpoints or some stories that may happen in African American communities that go unreported. So that's why places like the Sheridan Broadcasting Network or even Radio One, which is another outlet that still is in operation,
Okay.
uh, that's why they're so important. And so when Sheridan went out of business, there were still clients calling there looking for programming. So after a few months, I just made the decision that some of those clients who were still looking for programming, I knew the lay of the land. I knew how to, put together an operation, and I formed my own small company doing that.
That's awesome.
And that's Power News
Yeah,
Radio Network.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That's Power News Radio Network. Now,
Oh.
we'll get to Championship Chase. That's a totally different thing.
And that's a tongue twister for me, folks. Champion. I keep wanting to say championship chase. I'm so glad I said it correctly in your intro.
It's kind of easy when you create it. Once
Mhm.
once you create it, it's kind of easy for me to just say Championship Chase over and over again. But for the person who doesn't know a lot about it, or when they first hear it, it does sound like a tongue twister. But now it's been around. We're going to our 15th season this year. And Andrea, the reason that show was created because back in 2009, when I was still working for Sheridan Broadcasting,
Mhm.
I pitched an idea to the company about getting a local product on the radio and on TV to simulcast it about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because when you look at the National Football League, it's about 75 to 80% Black, if not more.
Yeah.
But in this market, except for the local channels or the local news stations that may have had one or two African American broadcasters talking about the team, there
Mhm.
was not inclusion that way. So, from my perspective, I just thought about it and said, I want to put something together that give us inclusion from a media standpoint, as opposed to just on the field standpoint as a player and or a coach or assistant coach.
Mhm.
And that's how Championship Chase came about. So I pitched it to the radio station. However, at the time, they didn't see the value in it. And it
And this
sat,
was what year was this?
it's back in
Again?
2009, actually
Okay.
2008,
Not that long ago, actually.
not that long ago.
So,
So it
yeah.
sat there. And after it not being really considered by management, I just said to myself, you know what? I'll use this as a freelance option for myself. When I'm not working, I'll use
Mhm.
this freelance option because I've always loved sports. I've always followed all football, especially the teams I like the most. And I know Pittsburgh has a huge Steeler following. Everybody here loves the
Yes.
Steelers.
Yeah.
So, and I knew that to me that was a void in the market. Now, there was an upside to it and there's a downside to it. We'll talk about that when we get to in diversity, equity, and inclusion.
All
But
right.
the upside of it was, finally there was a broadcast dedicated to covering the Steelers with inclusion locally from African American broadcasters as writers, hosts, producers, and analysts, as well as female inclusion. Because
Oh.
I could say I don't want to take credit for it, but Championship Chase started, inclusion of females, both black and white, when we
Nice.
started on the air back in 2009. Until that time, Pittsburgh really had no females, black or white, Hispanic or otherwise,
Mhm.
covering football. But now you
Yeah.
see a whole host of them covering football here locally. I don't want to take credit for it because nationally, you look at from a national standpoint,
Mhm.
most other cities are doing the same thing right now, and they started sooner than Pittsburgh. But we definitely were on the cutting edge of doing that back in 2009.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, I actually majored in sports marketing in my bachelor's degree, and I found it so hard to get in even an internship. It was an uphill battle because I was a female and I was Latina and a lot of different things. But yeah, it took a lot of work of my effort to get an internship. So I mean, I know you're not taking the credit, but kudos to you for the inclusion.
As a
So
matter of fact, one of the first female sportscasters we had is a Latina, Liz Costa. Liz Costa was very positive for us and also very popular. One of our broadcasters on Championship Chase when we started. And her and Ida Simpson, Ida's still with us. Ida Simpson has been with me in terms of sports producing since she was an intern at Sheridan in the early 2000s. So we took that up until now. She's still with us.
that is awesome. That is awesome. So so when as you were talking about the sportscasters not being giving the black perspective and all in the media, I think that they don't even realize that they're not even doing that because they don't think about things like that. As a sportscaster, they just want to give the stats, the the scores and the juicy stories that are going to sell or increase ratings, I should say.
Well, the, well,
So
the,
mhm.
Well, the importance of what we're doing is not the fact that we cover anything differently or cover the Steelers any differently from anyone
Oh,
else.
yeah,
The
yeah,
fact is that we are now showing representation from a media standpoint as opposed to just a
that's
player
awesome.
standpoint, because oftentimes those media jobs are not, available, or you don't
Hmm.
see that many African Americans or uh, Latinos in those positions being the lead guy or the lead female talking about the team from a perspective of analyzing what people just saw or
Hmm.
talking about what may come up in the game in the future. So
Yeah.
what that's the importance of championship chase is more like inclusion. So you don't have to
Okay.
be a player. I looked at it as, okay, not everybody's going to make the National Football League or play college football or whatever.
Yeah.
So there are going to be some kids who might be not the kid who can play, but the kid who can report. And I'll give you a story. When I was in high school in Alabama, I did go out for my high school football team in the 10th grade. Now, my mom was was against it, because she said, you're going to get hurt. And I wasn't the
Yeah.
biggest guy, still not the biggest guy, about average size, 5'8", about 180 pounds. Um, but after one practice, when a guy ran over me,
Was it
uh,
the refrigerator?
no, it was close. Well, he felt like the refrigerator running over me. But the thing about it was, I made the decision right then and there. You know what? I'll join the school newspaper and I'll write about the team, and that's what I did
That's
in the 10th
awesome.
grade. And even now, I think about that from the standpoint that not every kid can play football.
Hmm.
Certainly, females don't play NFL football, but they definitely can be ones who report on the team, who can cover the team, and who can bring it to the public. And that's the importance of having diversity when it comes to covering the Steelers or any other NFL team or college or pro team.
Yep, I agree because it also increases the viewer base because they're seeing people. The viewers are seeing people that look like them,
Right.
and they might be able to relate to them a little better. Not that they can't relate to others, but it's a positive thing, and it spreads the idea that, hey, if this person can do it, I can do it too. I'm not going to let other people's opinions of me stop me from reaching my dream. So
And there's another side to it too. A third level being that it's not just, you don't have to just be an athlete to do it,
yeah.
because most of the time when you see African American representation on TV these days, covering the sports, whether it be NBA or or sometimes Major League Baseball, or definitely the
Hmm.
NFL, it's mostly a former athlete who played the
Yeah.
game. So we're in the era where the athletes are taking jobs, but
Mhm.
that has further pushed African Americans down the totem pole in terms of getting those types of jobs on the air. So it, this why it's important to me to make sure there are shows like Championship Chase, both locally and in some cases national, who give people who don't play or haven't played, or just can be an outside voice who can be representative of someone who can cover sports.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'd forgotten actually until you mentioned that a lot of the athletes are becoming the sports broadcasters, um, and that's nice for them. But you know, it's like they can't play anymore. They retired and they are still in the game. But as you said, it pushes everybody down who wasn't a player to get to increase their chances of getting in. So yeah, it is a tough industry to get into because there aren't as many positions. So I'm glad that you have championship chase.
You said it right. You got
Oh,
it.
okay, go ahead. So for our listeners, I'm just gonna ask it right now. How can they listen to Championship Chase?
Well, our broadcasts normally start in mid-September or early October. We cover the Steelers from like the first weekend in October until the end of the season, and that could be January or February if they make it to the playoffs. So we give ourselves we kind of like look at it as if like, remember how TV shows used to start in like October as opposed they start in September. Now that
Mm-hmm.
window pushed back to October in a lot of cases where these fall TV shows start. We kind of look at Championship Chase the same way. We kind of let the first quarter of the season, the first 4 games, kind of sort themselves out, so we know what you're looking at. So by the time we hit the airwaves, we know what kind of team we have, and we still are going to go from October until the end of the season, and that could again be January or February. And there's another reason for that, and that's where, and we get into talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. From a sales standpoint, it is difficult to sell an African American TV show to the public, especially when you are a lone wolf and you're an independent producer. So the challenge is trying to find sponsors and things of that nature that can get us through a complete season. We have had a host of sponsors during our years who have been very instrumental in helping us to go through all the seasons. Now, the first couple of years we took a hit, but knowing that it was a labor of love in terms of just trying to get something established, we didn't mind that. We didn't go into the show. I mean, the people that I work with and myself, especially when I created, it wasn't meant to make a lot of money, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
just representative of what a person could do, or just representative of African Americans can cover the sports as well as play the sports. But the challenge has always been from the standpoint of, especially in the Pittsburgh market, getting the advertisers to support this program. But fortunately, again, we've had people who have been with us along the way who support what we do, and we appreciate that.
Nice. Nice. And Ty, just so you know, I will be asking how people who are interested in becoming a sponsor can get connected to you towards the
Mhm.
end of the podcast today.
Okay.
So in your experience, how has the lack of diversity in media impacted the types of stories that get told?
Uh, from a sports perspective, it doesn't hurt as much as from a general perspective.
Oh.
Uh, for example, from a general perspective, throughout my years covering news and sports at Sheridan Broadcasting,
Hmm.
the role of news director, there were stories that often would go unreported. And I'll give you a case. We've
Okay.
all heard the stories of, many times where African Americans have been victims of police brutality or victims of senseless crimes when they're stopped and things of that nature.
Mhm.
One that comes to mind is the Sandra Bland case, much like the Sonia Massey case that is going on right now. Sonia Massey was the young woman who was shot recently in Illinois in her home, you know, simply by calling 911. Well, years before Sonia Massey, there was Sandra Bland, who was stopped in Texas, was taking a new job in Texas, and she was stopped a routine traffic stop, and she was jailed, and she ended up losing her life in jail.
Oh
So
my
stories like that, like, okay, I can see right away that maybe you don't know the name uh,
no.
Sandra Bland, but there are a lot of African Americans who know that name, Sandra Bland. or there have been worldwide cases or nationwide cases where there are so many, people like George Floyd who have encountered police, and not going home. So
Mhm.
oftentimes we cover those stories, and those are the horror stories, unfortunately. But there are also stories of interest, like, we cover general stories, like when you talk about the supplemental nutrition programs, things of that nature, when there are cutbacks or things of that nature, when
Mhm.
there are new guidelines to be had that may get scant coverage in the news. Well, we pay special attention to make sure those stories are given extra airtime to
That's awesome.
explain what a family may need to do, or who they may need to contact in order to take advantage of those programs, or what they need to do if those programs suddenly go away. So stories like that. People are also interested in health stories. There's so many health factors in the Black community that people take for granted when you talk about diabetes.
Mhm.
Well, you know, diabetes has become so common in terms of talk about, but what exactly is it? How do you contract it? How can you avoid it? Or how can you better your situation? Things like high blood pressure. How can you eat better? What can you do to ward off those dangers of health problems and conditions? Things like prostate cancer. In the Black community, which has a high rate among Black men, because we have a higher incident and rates of prostate cancer than any other male species in the country.
Wow.
So those stories are important, and they may get mentions on the news when there are reports that cases have gone up, but we kind of break it down and tell listeners what the disease is, how it comes about, and how they can do things to better themselves from a health standpoint. So oftentimes those type stories are the ones that we cover that may not hit the mainstream media
Mhm.
on a continuous basis. These things are continuous, and they need to be talked about on a continuous basis and brought to the attention of the public.
That is awesome. Yeah, because sensitive topics like that, a lot of people don't talk about, and so or they're and if there's somebody who has a concern, they're embarrassed or self-conscious, or they don't want to seem vulnerable, so they don't ask. So it's great that shows like yours talk about those serious topics.
Mhm.
And as you were talking, I was like, that would be a great way to the medical community would be a great sponsor for your show. Doctors in private business and things like that. So doctors and everybody, if anybody get a hold of Ty here.
The great thing about that, see, we do that type of programming on a daily basis on the Power News Radio Network, which is a
Awesome.
nonprofit for the stations that we service nationwide. But in terms of locally, Championship Chase TV produces Black History Month programming and programming for Juneteenth in June of each year that pays special attention to those stories in terms of health and other situations. More so, we focus on health and things that are happening in the Black community that they need to know. For example, when COVID hit, we did a
Mhm.
whole series of reports on COVID, coping with coronavirus, which it was called. And there were so many different things, from everything talking about masks, everything talking about washing your hands twice by singing happy birthday. We talked to doctors and administrators about what people could do to protect themselves during COVID. And we also talked, and we still continue to talk about long COVID, because right now the government doesn't really want to highlight the fact that COVID is still going to go on. They still report about it, but you see it in the newspaper, you see it in articles, but it's not reported on a continuous basis
Mhm.
in broadcast media, because in broadcast media, the story always moves on. But the story, in many cases, Andrea, is still there. So
Yeah, I've had
COVID's,
a few coworkers who've gotten COVID within the past couple months.
and it's not going away.
Yeah.
So COVID is
Mhm.
still active, and there are viruses changing all the time. So
Mhm.
people need to be aware of what they're dealing with. One of our sponsors has been, and they plan to sponsor us again this year, is the Allegheny County Health Department when it comes to COVID messaging. And
Awesome.
what we do, it's important to get these COVID messages out to not only the Black community, but to
Mhm.
anyone who can pay attention to them. So
Yeah.
that's what we continue to do. We've never, since COVID happened in 2020, we've never backed off the messaging by way of Championship Chase or either the Black History Month and Juneteenth programs.
That's awesome. Yeah, because health, I mean, health is you have to maintain your health and take care of yourself no matter what. So coronavirus or no coronavirus, so that's good. And yeah, wow, I didn't realize that your show talked about things like that. That's awesome. I need to start listening to Ty's show. So
We'll broadcast and we'll report on anything that's of importance to the community. And it doesn't have to be just the stories from the Black community, because what affects one affects us all.
Exactly. Could not agree with you more. So can you share some examples of how inclusive content has positively influenced public perception or business outcomes?
Well, in terms of positive, how the content that we produce,
Mm-hmm.
what it does is highlighted what has gone unhighlighted. That's what it is, simply put a spotlight on some things locally here in Pittsburgh. Because hey, if you look at it right now, Andrea, there's no real central outlet for Black information here in Pittsburgh. Now, one of the things is people like to rely on Facebook, people like to rely on the social media, but the fact remains is that not everybody is social media savvy. So
Mm-hmm.
people depend on getting their information from Facebook, which sometimes can be erroneous.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. You get false information or misinformation from sources
Mm-hmm.
like that. And it's not to disparage them, but that's what happens. So even if we have once a week on our shows with Championship Chase to talk about a health issue or anything of that nature, it's more than what we need to try to get the message out to some people. So that's one of the differences this has made in just being available for the general public to view when it's on the air.
That's awesome. So what strategies can media companies implement to ensure that they are promoting diversity both on and off screen?
That's kind of a tough one because right now, diversity, equity, and inclusion is under attack.
Yes.
And if a company says they are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
it also takes putting your dollars forth to companies like mine or other small companies or Black companies or Latin companies that may be platforms for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Unfortunately, a lot of times companies say they support DEI, and it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to having a website that says all the right things. But
Yeah.
where is the proof in many cases? Where is the proof? And oftentimes companies like mine are basically met with, well, we have expended our diversity, equity, and inclusion dollars for the year.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm saying, basically put your money where your mouth is. And the other thing is you need to go beyond that. Not just give us diversity, equity, inclusion dollars,
Mm-hmm.
say that we included someone who is diverse, but make us a part of your general game plan in terms of your marketing efforts to the community. Because our shows not only reach Black people or Latino people, our shows
Mm-hmm.
reach all.
Yeah.
Because the funny thing about TV is you have people from 4 to 88 or whatever age, they watch TV and there's no color on it.
Mm-hmm.
People don't watch shows, they watch content.
Yes.
They often watch content, but they watch, they view. And oftentimes you don't know what that audience viewer or who or she or he is watching
Mm-hmm.
the TV. They may be Black, white, or other, but you don't know. So open up your pocketbooks and things of that nature to everybody. Not just don't put us in a category. Yes, we
Yeah.
are a show or a platform that highlights Black content or
Mm-hmm.
uses like analysts, hosts, and people like that as the face of our shows. But your company, if you want a platform to reach people, don't just stick us in that category. Stick us in the category of this show can reach everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And I like that you brought up that organizations, not just organizations, but people in general, need to do more than just putting the initiatives on a paper and checking a box here and there, and then that's it. They need to walk the walk consistently throughout the year, donating money to shows like yours to help support them and keep the message going. Not just because it's a Black-owned business, but because of as you said, the content. It reaches a whole wide audience, a variety of individuals of ages and backgrounds and races, and because it's, as you said, it's the voice in the content, but also when it comes to employees. it just, when your employees see that you're giving back to the community in certain ways and consistently, it's not just a one-time deal and it's over and done with, but it's something that the organization does on a regular basis.
I do want to
see that.
I do want to make it clear, though, we're not asking for a handout.
Oh, I know.
We're asking you to, partner with us to use our platform to promote your marketing message. There used to be an old slogan back in the 1970s that was put together by, I think it was the United Negro College Fund, when they were asking for donations. And the tagline was always, "We're not asking for a handout, just a hand." Well, we're not asking for
that.
It kind of tells you how old I am, right?
Me too. I mean, just people how old we both are.
I just remember we're not asking for a handout. It's just singing. We're asking for a hand. Well, in our case, we're not asking for handouts. We give you something in return. If you advertise with us, you get lower rates for a 6-month period, because you look at the Steelers going October, November, December, January, possibly February. And we're not counting September, but if you go into February and then you go into Juneteenth, that's 6 months of advertising with us that we will give you across the football platform, the Black History Month program. If you really want to champion your DEI efforts, well, the Black History Month program is right there for you. So you can really say, hey, we support Black history. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking them to work with us, because
as a sponsor, and
that would be well worth the return on investment.
Yeah, because it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and they're helping to keep the program going strong, and you're advertising for them in return, and getting the message out to your customer or to your listener base about their services. So in reality, they're probably getting a lot more out of it.
Well,
the sponsors get a lot more out of it than the show.
Yes, indeed. In many cases, that has been the case always, because not only can you get more out of it as a platform, but you get something for your DEI efforts, but you also reach new audiences that you haven't maybe reached before, new clientele that you haven't reached before. So that's one of the good payoffs about it.
That is awesome. So last question, and then we'll just continue the conversation. How can businesses outside of media learn from your approach to DEI and storytelling and apply it to their own operations?
Well, I think what they should look at is that if they think about inclusion in terms of what don't we have? Do we cater to just one set group of people, or do we look at the whole spectrum of Pittsburgh? And we know Pittsburgh's African American population is supposedly not that large, but on the contrary, it is.
It is pretty large.
And when you look at the Steelers, and we are a Steelers show, well, everybody watches the Steelers. So, and they watch Steeler content. So it doesn't matter that the show has African American hosts and writers and analysts and things like that, because they're singularly focused, like Mike Tomlin likes to say, singularly focused. We're focused on covering the Steelers and the teams they compete against. So if you're a business who is, in this case, if you're talking about advertisers, again, you're talking about reaching a wider audience. But if you're talking about a business who's like me and what they can do to focus on diversity, look at the fact that your company may not be as diverse as it can be, not only from a racial standpoint, but also from a gender standpoint. Because I do want to highlight again that one of the main reasons we also put Championship Chase together was I realized that women love the Steelers. They love football, but they especially love the Steelers. One of the first segments we used to do on our show when we started back in 2009 was Steeler Ladies. It was a very popular segment where we had 4 females during one segment at one time talking about the Steelers.
Cool.
Hadn't been done before. I still haven't seen that since. Now, the hard thing about bringing it back has been, it's hard to find females who are willing to go on camera talking about the Steelers in an extended segment. Honestly, that's been one of the biggest challenges.
Was it on just a radio?
No, it's TV. TV. It was TV. We had 4 females who would talk often. You know, we actually
Yeah.
one year we worked with the Pittsburgh Passion, a couple of their players who would come on to talk about the Steelers during their season. But that's been that was one of the challenges, is to find 4 females who were confident enough to talk about the Steelers. Because the great thing about the show too, Andrea, you don't have to be a professional to be on our show.
That's
Because
good.
the thing about it is, if you love the Steelers, if you know how to talk football, and
Hmm.
you can do it in a segment or in a very condensed segment, then you can do this. But oftentimes people are afraid. That's one of the things I like about the show, was the fact that now we did have a former guy, and God rest his soul, D. Thompson passed this past summer.
Oh, I'm
He
sorry.
passed early this summer. And D was a long-time Pittsburgh news and sports man who worked at both WTAE and Channel 11 for several years. And he passed away at 84 this past June. D worked with our show for the entire 15 years it was on the air. And another young man who passed away recently, Jonas Chaney, who worked at Channel 11 for a long time. Jonas passed away in July. And so, which is to say, fortunately, they help to train others who still work with us. One of the people on the show is Anthony Griggs. He's a former Steeler. He played with the Cleveland Browns and the Philadelphia Eagles, but his home is Pittsburgh now.
Well, we'll
So
forgive him. I'm just kidding.
he's been a member of the show for several years. And like I said, Ida Simpson, she has been with the show as long as I have been, when I created it back in 2009. And she's we call her the Queen Bee, because she's a diehard Steeler fan. Everything about her is about the black and gold.
That's cool. That's cool. So, ladies, lady listeners, if you're hearing and you're a Steeler fan and you are geared up to talking about,
you gotta know your football, though.
Yeah, you gotta know the football. Yeah.
Because if you don't, I will say she doesn't know football.
So, if you check all those boxes and you want to do it, reach out to Ty.
Reach out to us. We're always looking for new talent, and again, we don't necessarily look for professional talent. You don't have to have worked in a different market or something like that. But if you know football, because one of the great things about the show too, one of the premises behind it, Andrea, is to have people who are just like you, who are fans, talking about the team.
Yes.
Because oftentimes, if you get a player perspective, that's one thing. You get a professional broadcaster perspective, that's another thing. But to get a layperson's perspective is a totally different thing. They're not often heard. And those are the most important people to a football team, the people who support them, the fans.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And so, as you were talking about this last question, and you brought up the ladies of, I think there was ladies of Steeler, that was called
Steeler ladies, yeah.
Steeler ladies, sorry. And it reminded me of a conversation I was having with another guest, where we were saying that females tend to discount themselves out of opportunities so much quicker than their male counterparts. And we don't know if it's upbringing, the way parents raise boys, their male children compared to their female children, but it's something that a lot of females struggle with, and it's finally getting talked about and recognized, and hopefully the next generation won't be as self-conscious about taking those leaps towards their goals and their passions, and not talk themselves out of it. Because it is, as you had said, sort of stepping out of your comfort zone. They don't want to be on camera. It's like, oh my God, do I look like that? Okay.
Well, yeah, we face that. And with the climate of the nation right now, you see what happens when a female steps to the forefront without getting into politics. They're talked about. They're
what's going on in the Olympics right now as well.
Yeah.
What they're saying.
They talk about a female's hairstyle. She doesn't like, for Simone Biles in one instance, how she wears her hair. Hey, she's flipping 17 times in the air. So who cares about her hair?
Exactly.
But the climate of things happening, how oftentimes females, I hate to say it, but they sometimes deny themselves opportunity because they don't have the grit to take the criticism, and they are unfairly criticized, unfortunately. And you have to be able to take the grit. But in another sense,
Yeah.
people shouldn't be doing that. They should be downgrading people or abusing them verbally or things of that nature. So unfortunately, that still happens. And
Yeah,
as we see right
unfortunately, it does. Yeah, it unfortunately does, and it's even in organizations with the leadership. Like females tend to be more successful in leadership roles than males, but it studies have shown. But females tend to be called a lot meaner names than their male
now.
counterparts, and for the same stuff, sometimes even not as bad as some of their male counterparts do. And
Well, I mean, and I know we're not talking about the elections here, but I do want to make a point that even people disparaging Kamala Harris's name or Kamala Harris's credentials, and I've seen things where people say she's an idiot, she's crazy. Well, she's the vice president right now. What are you? So how can she be an
exactly.
idiot getting to the second highest powerful position in the country or in the world for that matter? So I think people need to take a look at themselves and look inward before they make perceptions about not only people, but females in particular.
Yeah. Yeah. Her credentials are extremely impressive and her experience. So, yeah, but yeah, I love that you had said, take a look at the inside of yourself first before, criticizing. But to me, it's like, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say it,
That's true.
and I mean, because part of diversity, equity, inclusion is belonging and feeling valued and respected. And when you criticize somebody in a non-constructive manner, it's just criticizing. It's not valuing them, it's not respecting them, it's putting them down and making them feel small. You're trying to put them in what you think is their place, or at least that's how it often comes across to the person being criticized, who tends to usually be, most of the time, some type of an individual from a marginalized population, whether it's a female, a person of color, LGBTQ plus, as a person with disability, or a few of the different identities above. And it's it goes back to my teaching days, and that pre-K, elementary, primary school days. It's like the golden rule. Treat others how you want to be treated. But to me, I often bring up the platinum rule: treat others how they want to be treated. But worst case scenario, treat others how you want to be treated, because nobody likes to be treated disrespectfully or criticized in a non-constructive manner. Nobody, I mean, and some people don't even like constructive criticism, but it's just like,
And that's the disturbing thing about DEI being under attack right now, because if DEI programs go away, those types of attacks are going to become more prevalent.
yeah, yeah,
And that's the horrible thing about it. And the horrible thing is about it, there's so many people who support those type of attacks as opposed to supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts.
And it's just going to give another department in organizations tons more work, which is the employee labor and relations departments, with all the grievances. And so DEI is beneficial for everybody, but like this employees and staff and all, but it's also beneficial to the organization as a whole, because you're making sure your employees feel valued and respected and stuff, which decreases the grievances, which saves you money in the long run. I hate to bring it back to that, but it can save you money in legal fees and everything for something, to prevent something, for lack of a better word, I apologize, listeners, stupid from happening,
Yeah, and
or being said.
what people need to look at too, when you talk about DEI, whether it be in sports, whether it be in news, whether it be in any kind of business or walk of life, diversity, equity, and inclusion is progressive. A lack thereof is regressive. And do we want to proceed or recede? I think that's what a company has to look at. If you want to be progressive and grow your company, you have to be diverse. You have,
Mm-hmm.
have to include equity, and you have to have DEI initiatives and grow those initiatives. So I think what a lot of companies do, particularly Pittsburgh, is one of those cities where if it's going to continue to grow and be the city that it can be, because there are a lot of us who don't think it is the city that it can be because it's not as diverse as some others are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to get there one day. Maybe not this generation, but the next. It has to be more diverse.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I moved here from Texas in 2014, I was in culture shock, and I'm a military brat, so I grew up moving around different places, and my parent was in the military, and but I have seen it slowly. It's slowly improving. It has become more diverse in these past 10 years that I've been here, which is a great thing to see. But as you said, we still have so much more to go, a long way to go, if we're gonna catch up to our other cities that are of similar size to us. And it's
They should move more at a hair's pace as opposed to a tortoise.
yeah. Yeah. But it's very important, listeners, for you to recognize that the more diversity a city brings in, the more jobs are created, because a lot of like immigrants and marginalized populations start their own businesses. So
And you also keep people from moving.
That's
because
true.
this person has had an exodus of people fairly recently within the past decade, primarily in many cases, and they don't talk about it as often, they talk about other things, but it's because of its lack of diversity. So a lot of people in the city.
Yep. And yeah, so it's like Pittsburgh has a lot of universities here. When I talk to my family, they're like, how many universities does Pittsburgh got? And it's that small of a city. I mean, so we educate and they leave because there is that lack of diversity in a lot of organizations in the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and this state overall. And so people want to go where they feel like as part of that they belong, and
They want to be part
and
of
they
the
can
family.
grow and
Right.
Mhm.
And they want to feel that they can get a job and get a job that's going to be a good paying job for them. And oftentimes that's
Yes.
not the case. It hasn't been the case because I know of several people I know personally who have moved for that reason.
Yeah. This unfortunately, the city is behind in the pay scale, and like I'm making now what I made 10 years ago in Texas, and it's I took a big pay cut when I moved there. Yeah,
Well,
it's
and I don't want to disparage the city because I mean, I wouldn't be here if I didn't have a certain affection for Pittsburgh because my kids are grown. They've all moved away. I have the option to move except for championship chase. Everything I do is transportable. However, it does kind of highlight the fact that I've often looked at Pittsburgh as one of those cities that if there was not cable TV, you would not know how much diversity exists nationwide.
oh
So they
yeah.
have support to do. If you're behind, if you're still it's still 10 years being paid what you were paid 10 years ago, that means the city has some work to do on all fronts.
Yes, it does. It does. And I mean, though I work in nonprofits, so if you're a
Mhm.
for-profit corporate person, it's a little different. I work in the nonprofit industries, but yeah, but Pittsburgh is a great town. It is slowly on the road to becoming diverse and inclusive, and I'm excited to see it continue to do so. As I said, as I moved here 10 years ago, it's gotten a little better. There's more Latinos here than there were 10 years ago. And there's places to eat now, yay! But businesses. And, but yeah, it's when it comes to sports and media, though, well, not sports, but media, I should say, we still have a
It's
lot of
severely
work to do.
it's severely lacking from a
Mhm.
Latino perspective and for an African American perspective. It's lacking. And I think one of the things that pains me more than anything else, we don't have a radio station. I don't know from a Hispanic standpoint, but I know from a Black standpoint that caters to the needs of the entire African American community here. And I mean
Yeah.
by that I mean from a news standpoint, informational standpoint,
Hmm.
and for just being a voice of the community. That is not here anymore. And that's what Whammo used to be, not to disparage what it's doing right now, but that's what radio used to be in Pittsburgh when they had that one centralized location where people of color could get all their information and get it from a trusted source. But that's no longer here. I mean, it speaks to a different day and time, certainly in media, because a lot of people get it from the internet. But the caution again, I like to say about internet is that you have to be very careful because
Hmm.
there's so much misinformation out there.
Yeah.
And oftentimes you don't get the information until it's too late. When people say, oh, did you know that person, this happened? Oh, I've never heard about that. Well, it was in the news, but where did you get it from?
Exactly. Reputable sources, people, reputable sources.
Right.
The Onion is not a reputable source.
It's not.
It's
And
a comic source.
a 30-minute newscast or an hour newscast can't give you everything. And it's not going to give everything for everybody either,
Yeah.
because stories are, are pre-prepped. They give so many minutes to a story and they choose what they choose to cover.
Yeah.
So that's the difference. And that's the dilemma here right now.
I agree.
But it's not, but again, the great thing is people just don't read things in Pittsburgh. They read things all over. And I think
Around the world.
it's made for more, should I say, a more wider range of information from all sources as opposed to one source. Because if you relied on Pittsburgh, you wouldn't get it in some cases.
Yeah.
So stepping outside the framework does help people, and certainly there are challenges in everything. Like some people don't have internet. We take it for granted that everybody knows how to work a computer. I think you and I talked offline one time about the fact that oftentimes these news stations, they'll say, if you want to know more about this story, go to our app and read more about it. Or if you want to catch the podcast again, just download our app. And there's something like, what's an app?
Yeah, or they don't have a smartphone. They still have those little Nokia.
Yeah. These are basically computers you're buying now. They're not like, things that you can just buy cheaply. These are computers that you're buying, and the price is astronomical for a lot of people. They can't afford internet. So I think we take it for granted. That's why in my mind, radio will always be a viable source for the community. However, there's not diverse radio in Pittsburgh. But I don't want to downplay Pittsburgh, because I'm here and we're gonna make this happen. And if you advertise with our show, we'll make you happen, and we'll market your idea. We'll give you a platform to not only show your commercial, but you can also come on the show and talk about the service or product that you have.
Awesome. So, listeners, I will be asking Ty for his contact information, everything in a little bit. But before we do that, let's talk about some key takeaways. So Ty and I talked about challenges in DEI representation. We talked about the systemic barriers that prevent diverse voices from being represented in media and business, and how this impacts storytelling and decision-making. We talked about Ty's journey. We gained some insights from his career, including his pioneering work in creating Black-led sports programming and the significance of producing culturally relevant content. We talked about the role of media in shaping perceptions and explored how media influences public perceptions of race and diversity, and the importance of inclusive content in changing narratives. And we talked about the business case for DEI. We discussed why diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just ethical imperatives, but also crucial for business success, driving innovation, and reaching broader audiences. And we talked about actionable steps for change. We mentioned some practical strategies for media and business professionals to promote DEI in their organizations, from recruitment to content creation. Do you have any other key takeaways for our audience, Ty?
Yeah. When you mentioned the fact that, what we look at in media, remember that these decisions are made by editors, producers, and things of that nature. So what you see on TV often is a product of what they decide to show you on TV from a news standpoint or from a sports standpoint. because oftentimes, and as we've all seen with the recent happenings here in Pittsburgh and surrounding areas, there are things that have happened that if you are a viewer, you question how come they didn't cover this angle or that angle. And that's
Mm-hmm.
that's the importance of you being diverse yourself in terms of seeking out more information from more sources. You have to seek out more sources of information, not only outside the framework, but inside the framework. There are places where you can read newspapers and publications here that may give you a broader range of information as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
what you might get in a 1 or 2 minute story or a 15-second soundbite you see on TV from a news perspective. That's
I
why
agree.
you have to be as a people, whether you're black, white, Latino, otherwise, to be more well-rounded, to know more of what's going on, to know the full story. Don't just rely on what they tell you on TV, because unfortunately, right now, the mainstream media seems to be compromised in some ways because, again, remember, they're limited to tell you what they can tell you in a 30-minute newscast or a 60-minute newscast because they
Mm-hmm.
have a rundown, they have sponsors to show their commercials, and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get a limited view of what is really happening sometimes. So you have to do yourself a service by maybe doing a little bit more reading and research. If you have a computer
Mm-hmm.
or if you have access to information, read it, because that way you can get a full, well-rounded account of what's really going on.
I agree. Like for me, I watch different news stations. I find some other countries' news stations are a lot more informative than some of our major news stations. They cover a lot more of the story, and some stories that our news stations, our major news network stations don't cover. So it's but also reading from different um, news media outlets is very important as well, just like Ty said, because you want more than one station's perspective.
Yeah, I would say don't look for infotainment as much as look for information. And
Mm-hmm.
not to plug them, but PBS is a good guideline where you're not going to get all the frills and bells and whistles. You're going to get the reports, and that's as best as I can tell you in terms of if you're looking for someone who's not doing the infotainment or infotainment type of news. That's what PBS is. Locally, you're gonna get pretty much you're gonna get in any market. But in terms from a national perspective, if you want to go away from the teasing and all that, because coming up we'll tell you about this, and then they come back and they tell you 10 seconds of what they said they're going to tell you, 2 minutes ago. I've seen that sometimes, Andrea, where a news station will, like a network news station, will tease a story coming up, and they've teased it for the first 15 minutes of the broadcast. They finally get to it, then they'll come from commercial, and the story be like for like a 15-second blur. It's a blurb,
Wow.
not a story.
Wow.
We'll be back in a moment.
And we're out of time.
There's always comical to me when I watch stuff like that.
Oh yeah, and you're just waiting, and that's their way of
That's all I give you. Yeah.
to watch their whole show.
Like, that's it. You gave me 10 seconds. I waited here for 20 minutes. You gave me 10 seconds. Now you go back to
Yeah.
another commercial. So that's what happens.
Yep. Some next steps for listeners: engage with DEI initiatives, get involved in or support DEI initiatives within your organization or communities. Audit your media consumption, just as Ty was saying. Critically assess the diversity of the media you consume and seek out more inclusive sources. And implement change. If you're a business leader, take actionable steps in diversifying your teams, content, and company culture. Do you have any other possible next steps for our listeners?
I just don't delay, do it. Don't talk about it, be about it. Don't talk about that we need to do more with DEI. Just do it. And be on the cusp of people who can make us more progressive as a city in terms of more inclusion, because you'll find out if you do include more people, not only will your business grow, but the city will grow. Because I think there are people out there who can do the things that you probably don't think they can do, but they can't do them if you don't give them an opportunity. Like in my case, you don't think we can move your products and services? Well, we have an audience that and clientele that you may not be aware of, because all money is green, and we can help you bring in more dollars and cents into your business. So give us an opportunity to, showcase your product or service. We'll give you an opportunity to come on and talk about your product or services, and we'll see what happens. It's worth the investment, because what you
Yes.
will spend on our show, Championship Chase, is very little in compared to what you would spend somewhere else, and for a 6-month period.
Nice. So if that brings me to a nice transition into my next question for you. If people want to get in touch with you, Ty, especially like sponsors, or if people want to just connect with you as a professional, or they want to, if there's some ladies out there, lady listeners out there who are, all Pittsburgh Steelers, and they want to do your, I'm going to get it wrong, Ladies of Steel?
Well, Steeler ladies.
Steeler ladies, sorry, yeah. Steeler ladies show. How can these individuals get in touch with you? What are the best ways?
All right, very simple. My emails for Championship Chase, it's championshipchasetv@yahoo.com. Again, it's very simple. championshipchasetv@yahoo.com. That's the email for Championship Chase. Personal email is tm2832@gmail.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Hit my LinkedIn page, Ty Miller, for the Power News Radio Network. You can send me a message either way, and I can contact you.
All right. And listeners, I will have Ty's contact information on one of the last slides of our podcast today, as well as in the summary of our podcast. And Ty, so what is the best way for somebody who is interested in being a sponsor to get a hold of you? The email, the Championship Chase TV at Yahoo?
Or my personal email, tm2832@gmail.com.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, thank you so much, Ty, for being a guest today on Get Diversifuse podcast. It was so much fun talking with you, and just continuing our conversation from the other day. I loved it. Just thank you so much, listeners. This podcast will drop on Thursday. All of our episodes are dropped on Thursday. So just keep checking us out every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and Spotify. And just keep listening, share the love, share the podcast with your friends and network, and get the message out there that diversity, equity, inclusion is alive. It's not dying. It's alive and well, and it's going to continue to grow because it's very important. With that, listeners, remember, stay Diversifuse. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Be a guest speaker on the Get Diversifuse podcast? I'm on the lookout for guests, so if you're passionate about DEI and would like to share your unique insights, experiences, or success stories, I want to hear from you. If you're a fellow podcaster who's passionate about DEI, let's swap the mic and amplify each other's voices. If you're interested in being a guest, reach out to me at Andrea@diversifuse.com, and I'll send you the link for a guest interest form. Hope to hear from you soon. Remember, stay Diversifuse. Now go out there and make a difference. And as always, for more strategies on building inclusive workplaces and communities, check out Diversifuse. We're here to guide you on your DEI journey. Make sure to visit our website at diversifuse.com and follow us on social media for the latest happenings, blog posts, tips, and events.